huge leaps forward in the development of the Mexico federal system. I've never seen anything like it personally in all my experience to take this large of a step forward. And I think it's very admirable on their part to take this on. It's a daunting task. Again, to determine future needs for bed space infrastructure, determine future capital operating expense. The model program, we found in our experience in working within the United States and outside of the United States that one of the major issues with any entity of corrections is being able to clearly define a future cost of a system. You've got to be able to budget for it, you have to anticipate it, and how do you do that? The best way to do that, in our opinion, is to develop a model program that you're going to follow. This program allows you to figure on operational expense, infrastructure expense, well in advance of the need. So you can anticipate that, you can inform the government and the taxpayer of what that expense may be in the future, and it also allows for you to determine if you need to adjust your approach to corrections or to implement new programs as opposed to incarceration. What would be more efficient and less expensive, and what would help the system itself rather than continually incarcerating without any other options or opportunities. So it's kind of a rule or a gauge for you to utilize for future planning. And then ultimately to develop a strategic plan with those options. Secondly, we established the model program. We worked for numerous hours, days, weeks, months, and in years even, developing this program. This was not something, again, that CGL or any other company came in and did. This was a collaborative effort led by Mr. Patino in developing this program and getting to the focus point of what the future needs and future desires of Mexico would be. Secondly, we developed space standards so that we're consistent in our system. One of the most important things and one of the most difficult things any country or any correctional entity has is developing a standard and keeping that standard so that there's consistency amongst the entire system. This allows for ease of operations. It allows for staff to be moved between facilities and easily pick up the operations and understand how things are going, as opposed to everyone working autonomously and not understanding what the guy next door, so to speak, is doing in their penitentiary. It allows for every facility to learn from other facilities' mistakes, which is extremely important in any correctional system. We have to learn from the mistakes that are made in the past so that we can avoid them as much as possible in the future. So a consistent system and a consistent operation amongst the entire system is extremely beneficial in providing those training tools and that insight to avoid major problems in the future. And then third, finally on the space program, we applied the standard to the need. What do we need for support services? It's not just a matter of putting the beds in the correction facilities. It's a matter of providing the support services, food service, medical, inmate program, education programs, work programs, very important in Mexico, industries programs, manufacturing, if that's the desire of the facilities in the system. But let's keep it consistent and let's keep it working together, whereas one facility may benefit or may start a industrial process and a second facility may continue that process and a third may continue it and finally a product is produced. How can that system work together and uniformly create a product that could benefit the system, benefit the country, and also provide the inmate with a marketable trade and experience. So when they get out of prison, hopefully they go to something other than what put them in there in the first place. And then third, also, what can we provide in that prison as a program to assist them in that next step in reintegrating into society? At least 95 to 99% of inmates who are incarcerated will walk away from that facility at some point. They're not sentenced to life terms. So we can't ignore, and we've learned the hard way, that you can't ignore these inmates and then let them out in so many years because they don't know anything else. And we created in the United States a university of crime, so to speak, in prisons and many other countries. And I think now many, as Mr. Patino, are seeing that and saying, we got to stop that ugly process. We've got to create something that's going to benefit society as a whole. And part of that is teaching a trade, educating inmates, and giving them some other opportunities when they get out. I talked a little bit about where we started with this and how we got to where we are now. Obviously, human rights of all people is a key factor in how we develop the program. The dignity and worth of individuals, as I discussed, you've got to create some kind of confidence that they can go out and they can get a job and they can be productive in society and they can abide by the rules and regulations and the laws of the country. Fairness and equality under and before the law. Fairness in a prison is a difficult thing to imagine sometimes, but our officers have to treat our inmates fairly, strictly. They need to abide by the rules and the regulations that are set forth in the operations, but it has to be fair. We can't give an individual one regulation and change it the next day and expect them to follow and abide by our regulations, because if it's constantly changing and it's a moving target, we're setting them up for failure. So we needed to define the fairness in accordance with the Mexican law and traditions and the customs and how we treat individuals in general. And then managing prisoners honestly, with openness and with integrity. That was a key factor that they obviously insisted upon, and a key factor in any program to be a success. Once we developed the space standards, and how we arrived at those space standards was not by my guidance necessarily specifically, but we use the norms of other countries, the international standards that have already been developed and tested through the UN and other sources. Developed hopefully some national space standards for Mexico that may one day become a Mexican national standard across the board. Again, human rights requirements, labor requirements, and then the user and the operational requirements. How do you want to operate these facilities? You tell us. Let us see what we can come up with to help you develop that operational aspect of your facilities. They're going to differ from country to country and custom to custom and so forth, and we need to know how that operation needs to take place so that we can adapt and create the model program for that. The basis of the program, again, one key point I want to say in here is staff represents the most important resource. Staff many times is overlooked. I can't emphasize that enough. That is your resource for a facility. You can build any facility anywhere using whatever equipment, and you can expend extremely large amounts of money on this facility, but if your staff is not operating that facility properly, you're going to have problems. So they are by far the most important resource that you have as corrections leaders. We've got to train them, and we've got to make them professional, and we've got to make them think professionally. And it's a task, and it's hard to maintain, but that's key and instrumental in keeping a system successful. You can go to the next. Operational conditions. Again, the model program lays out some operational conditions that we need to abide by for security purposes. We have to decide, and we did decide, on the operational approach to running these facilities. Primarily, the approach is direct supervision, which is something that is relatively new in Mexico. It's something that allows for inmates to be treated the way that they act or in line with the way they act. If they want to behave, if they want to make themselves better, if they want to abide by the rules, then they will be treated a certain way. If they don't, then we have the means to treat them as they are acting. What we found and experienced, and I'm a former operator of a facility, is that it works extremely well, but it's a task and a step that is hard to take initially. But once you do, you see the benefits of that. Inmates change, their way of thinking changes, their acceptance of the rules and regulations is more cooperative, and again, it makes it a safer place for my officers, it makes it a safer place for the inmates, and it makes for less destruction of our facilities. Once we reach that point in the operations, everything gets better, less expensive to operate. Our turnover of turnover of officers is less. We have less coming and going. We have a trained professional staff that sticks with us for long lengths of time and wants to progress through the system and be sitting in one of these positions one day. They've experienced it from the ground level, and they've worked their way up, and they've created a better system overall. We address types of construction, types of finishes, security levels. A maximum security area is not built the same way as a minimum custody area, as we all know. So we set that standard and developed a type of construction for each level, and it addressed specifically why it is that it needs to be that way. All of this is laid out in the model program. And we applied the space standards to develop the initial what we call adjacency diagrams. What needs to be located next to the medical area? What needs to be located near intake? Where do programs need to be located in accordance with the housing units and so forth, down to the very detail of restrooms and janitor's closets and things of that sort. And then finally, there's the last slide that I have, and I'm going to let Mr. Ornstein present some technology that's being implemented. These are just some of the construction, some of the current construction going on in facilities in the country, where we're transforming existing facilities to the new model program, and also some of the bottom pictures there are construction of the precast cells. They're utilized throughout the world now. Concrete cells that can be actually manufactured, poured in another place, which I know a lot of you have experienced and have dealt with and even have facilities like that now. But these allow for very quick but very, very secure facilities to be built. And so this is just some of the examples of what's going on right now around the country in Mexico. And with that, I'd like to pass it on to Mr. Ornstein and just to point out a few of the technological advances that are taking place currently.
As